Hey guys, we're going to review enzymes. So at the end of your note package, just behind the hormone chart, we are going to talk about the enzymes and go through them. So you have a little chart with enzyme names, secreted from, and function. I'm going to talk through all of them. Now, a couple recommendations. You could listen and then you can fill in the chart at the very end, or you can listen, pause, fill in the chart, move on to the next one. It's up to you, whatever's easiest. Just make sure your chart is completely filled out. So we're going to start in the world of carbohydrates. So I'm going to go through all the things that break down carbs. So the very first thing that breaks down carbs is salivary amylase found in your mouth, coming from the salivary glands. In simple terms, salivary amylase's job is to take a bun that maybe you've eaten and break it down into a disaccharide, which could be something like maltose. Okay. Maltose is made of two glucoses, which will be broken down later. So essentially, you're taking a very complex polysaccharide, a starch, a cellulose, or a glycogen, and just breaking it down into its disaccharide parts in your mouth. Now, that carb is going to travel from your mouth to your stomach where nothing is going to happen other than just mechanical digestion. And then it's going to enter into your small intestine. When it enters into your small intestine, after it's been released from your stomach, the pancreas releases something called pancreatic amylase. Pancreatic amylase is super important. Why? Because it has to continue that digestion of the polysaccharides to the disaccharides. Why? Because if you think about how long you actually chew your food, it's not very long. So your mouth doesn't get the full effect of breaking down those polysaccharides. It needs more time. So pancreatic amylase comes from the pancreas into the duodenum and helps continue that process. Once those disaccharides are made, we have something called carbohydrases that are secreted from the intestinal wall. I have broken them into the three carbohydrases. Essentially, you eat something, you're going to break it down into its lowest form, but it's going to be in one of these disaccharides first. So sucrase is like common table sugar. Maltase is usually found in like breads, and lactase is something you may know from like milk. So those are the enzymes breaking down sucrose, maltose, and lactose. They all come from the intestinal wall, which is the small intestine, the duodenum. Okay. So they are secreted out, all three, into the duodenum, where they take that disaccharide and break it down into some monosaccharides. Essentially, again, if you're eating a piece of bread and you break it down into maltose, okay, maltose will then be broken down into glucose and glucose via maltase. Okay, if you drink a glass of milk, okay, there's lactose in milk. You're not going to do anything in the mouth because there's no polysaccharide there for you to digest. Instead, it's going to go all the way to your intestinal wall and you're going to secrete lactase to help break it down. Now we're breaking things down into the monosaccharides of glucose, fructose, and galactose. All right. So that's kind of the journey of carbohydrates through your body and the different enzymes that are needed in order to break those carbs down. We're going to move on to our beautiful proteins. So you ate a hamburger. The bun is being broken down in your mouth. The hamburger itself, ladies and gentlemen, the protein from it is just being chewed and broken up through mechanical digestion. Nothing happens until it reaches your stomach. So secreted from the gastric pits, pepsin has a huge role. Okay, so your stomach is secreting pepsin. It is activated by hydrochloric acid, which is also found in the stomach, and it breaks down those polypeptides. So it takes those polypeptides and it starts to loosen and break them into, I'm going to say dipeptides, but really it's smaller polypeptides. Okay, so it breaks it into these smaller polypeptides or these small chains of amino acids, and it sits in your stomach for a while. Once your stomach releases it, trypsin and chymotrypsin are released. Oh, and pepsidases. These are all coming from your pancreas. Now, trypsin, chymotrypsin, which I didn't list here, but you will see later, and pepsidases all come from the pancreas and do the same thing. They take the dipeptides or those polypeptide chains and they break them down into amino acids. So you'll see that the amino acids is the smallest level you can go. Okay. And that's all done from the secretion of the pancreas into the duodenum. Now, I said to break down that are from the stomach, that is the function. They are getting broken down in the duodenum. So that's kind of the journey of proteins as it goes through your body. Nothing happens in the mouth Everything happens in the stomach, more happens in the intestine. We're going to talk a little bit about fats. So I haven't listed bile on here because bile is not an enzyme. It is a helper essentially to the process, but you'll see it later on. So lipase is coming from the pancreas. So this is its job is to break down lipids, hence lipase, lipid enzyme. So we take the emulsified fat that has been emulsified by bile, and we take it and we attack it with lipase. And what lipase does is it breaks it down into 3 fatty acids and 1 glycerol, which is essentially what makes up all of the different parts of fats. Okay. So lipase is the only thing we need for fats, and the only place fats get broken down in our body is in the small intestine. The enzyme comes from the pancreas. All the work is done in the small intestine. The last thing I want to touch on are 2 that are not as important and we don't talk about as much in Bio 20, but I'm going to bring it up because it is important base knowledge that you can have. Nucleases and nucleosidases essentially break down nucleic acids. Now, we don't talk about nucleic acids really until Bio 30. DNA is a big chapter, but we do need to understand that our body does digest and break them apart. So nucleases are released from the pancreas into the duodenum, and their job is to take the DNA of whatever we're digesting and break it apart into its single nucleotide. So a sugar, phosphate, and nitrogenous base all together. All right, so it's broken down into 3 parts of the DNA. They're still stuck together though. The phosphate, the sugar, and the nucleotide, nitrogenous base, are all stuck together. That is called a nucleotide. That nucleotide will even get broken down even farther, so we can have those single phosphates to help with converting ADP to ATP, for example. We need those kinds of phosphates. So nucleosidases come from our intestinal wall, and they actually break apart the phosphate from the sugar and nitrogenous base. So the nitrogenous base and the sugar stay together as something called a nucleoside, and then the free phosphate is pulled apart and used for other places. So that's the chart of all the enzymes that you are going to need to know, where they're from and their job. Please fill your chart in, and if you have any questions, please let me know.